So, guys, welcome back to FL Studio once again. This is Vals Galactica 6.4, 140 BPM. I think this is also the first time in a while that I go back to 140 for that slower pace that I think is very appropriate for the kind of song that we're doing. After all, this is supposed to be a waltz. Waltzes can't be balls to the walls fast. They are romantic and they're elegant and they're more laid back, right? So essentially, this song started pretty much as an experiment. What could happen if I worked on a time signature other than 4/4? Well, the reason I settled for 6/4 is it feels like half time 3/4, but at full time you get a lot more flexibility in terms of where to put the accents in the drums, the timing of things. It can be moved around a little bit more as opposed to 3/4, which is a little bit too short for that. So yeah. Melodies are the name of the game. You'll notice a lot of call and response, setup and payoff, what I usually do in my arrangements. And of course, it didn't hurt to add a few growls and stuff here and there. So, what do we have in the intro? Just 3 pads. It's just... This one is maybe the most obvious because it's the loudest. But then there's also this one. And I believe this is just a pulse-stretched vocal with a marimba on top for some reason. I mean, that's what the sample says. Don't quote me on that, but... if the sample says that, it's because I probably did it like that. And then there's just a very slight sub in there. Well, maybe not that subtle, but... it is definitely there. This is I took this from the famous Dolby subdrop that I like to use in almost all my tracks because it's just a sick meaty subdrop. But this is the tail end of it where it just has a sustained note, and just I tuned that to be D, and we are onto the bulk of the song. So first we have the plug. And if you realize, here, you might actually notice what I wanted to do initially for this song. I wanted the main melody to just be the circle of fifths. So if you see, this is a fifth. This is another fifth. If you go down, dun dun dun. I just did that an octave higher. And then, same thing. So this is just like 3 notes that are next to each other in the circle of fifths. And I just wanted to try that out, like as an experiment, as a challenge, to see what I could do with the circle of fifths. But then, like, halfway through, I just went, all right, screw it, let's just make whatever. And here already in the intro, you can see a tease of the melody from the second drop, right? It's already there in the intro, so that's already setting you up for the ending of the song. Like a whole 4 minutes later. You just don't know it yet. And this octave jump will allow me to do the same melody, dun 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 dun, just in a higher register. And then the piano finally comes in. It does the same motif as in the chorus. Then there's a music box here, which once again does the second drops motif. Just with a different set of chords. Dun, dun, dun. So this is 6th, 7th, and then 4th. Dun, 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 dun. That's gonna set up the boom impact here, and then that's gonna come into the verse or chorus, you might want to call it that too. I did do some pads. I made this just doing an incredibly fast ARP. Just coated in tons of reverb. So I actually did 2 reverbs 2 reverbs for this. I did 3 reverb too. This is weird because I haven't used this in ages. This proves that this project was made last year. This proves that I made this in 2021, y'all. Because it's pretty much been a year since I last used any like 3D reverb. And then there's the Tora reverb, of course. But yeah, with those 2 reverbs and a crystallizer at the end, I can get that sick pad. And this means I get to do whatever chord I want, because it's the notes here that are going to make the chord. So if I change this note around, that's going to be a different pad entirely. I get to say what chord does this pad make by just switching up a few notes in the piano roll with this method. So just a very fast ARP with a ton of reverb. I should have exported that for Ultranova. I think I'll do at some point. And this is a keypad from the Hyperverb part of Hypernova. It's just a little more subtle. It does build up a little bit more, but not much. And then there's this. Just the ARP that comes in very, very faintly. But then I believe it's going to be featured more in the first drop. Nice and bubbly. And then there's the deep pad here. Again, it's just a basic detune saw. Detune saw reeds. And then our reversed cymbal into a boom impact. A sub drop. So this is just a bounce that I exported from an ARP. I believe this is a resampled AU5 sample. So like rechopped AU5 sample. I just bounced that in Edison so it wouldn't use like 80% of my CPU with the processing chain that it had. And then the rest was just about turning on the stretch and repitching it as much as I wanted to get the right chords. Right? Same goes for the atmospheres. This is just a single sample that has been repitched a lot of times just to get the right chords. That's one pitch. That's another pitch. And they're all the same sample. And then there is a violin here. Of course, this is back when I didn't do the MIDI mappings for Contact. So you'll see the violin is in one instance of Contact. There's a, a cymbal on another. There's a Bram on another Contact. So I have like 5 contacts open instead of just one. Like the method that I showed on a previous video on my YouTube channel. So on like how to actually use Contact. Razor, because of course no modus track is done without the obligatory razor. I believe this is in high quality mode. No, it's not. Or maybe it is. Using 13 CPU. It probably does. Yeah, this might have the razor hack from AU5. And these are some saws, but just with a flanger on top. See that? I actually used the kilohertz flanger. I usually use the FL one. I don't know why I thought at that moment that the kilohertz flanger was better. Maybe it just sounded more like what I wanted with this one in particular. So as you can see, I'm automating the delay. So if you scroll down a tiny bit, you'll see what you don't really see. So this is what shows up in the screenshot that I sent you guys in the Discord server, and like this is all fancy and stuff, but then you scroll down and you see total chaos. There's a reason why the automation is all the way at the bottom on my project template. So yeah, just doing the same chords. And then I believe on the sidechain bus, I have or I don't really remember what it was. Oh, here, group volume LFO. So I have all these instruments routed to a group, to a bus, and in this bus, I have an LFO linked to this volume knob in Free Balance, and what this allows me to do, and see how it goes? And by automating the mix level, I can automate how much of the LFO I want there to be. And that is basically how the whole verse works. It's just go back and forth between this free balance being on and off. So it's just one automation. Let's see if I can find it. Balance mix level. Yeah, here. With just this, I can automate how much of the LFO action I want, right? Let's see when it's off and when it's on. That made for a very interesting dynamic. By the way, thank you so much for the follow. You are now human. For the balance, my beloved. I have actually switched my setup a tiny bit. I have mounted my monitor on an arm. That means I get to put the laptop further back in the table and I can use the mechanical keyboard again. But that does mean that my laptop is now like all the way at the back of the table. And that means my the viewport that I see is much smaller now. So it's very hard for me to see the like who exactly is following, because it's just like a tiny window in my laptop's monitor all the way at the back of the table now, and I just have this big ass ultra wide monitor for the two windows of FL, the playlist and the mixer up here. So we get to the main verse. You have this lead, which is 2 layers. Let's have a look at what this is. So this is, I resampled a guitar lead sample from AU5. Let's sidechain please, there it is. So if you listen to the whole sample, it sounds like this. So I took the first part. Whoops, not that. So I just took that, I looped it around, and that just makes an infinite sample, and I can use it on any note that I want. That means I also get to do glides and portamentos with it. Then I have 2 layers, so this is one, and the second one is a sample from the Bejeweled games. Just slightly different, but very similar. Yeah, it just has a slightly different sound to it. To the flute! Maybe I could have used the flute if I was on a really low budget for this. No, you can't really do high A's with this. No, you can't. It's not physically possible. And now let's honk the automaton, because we have to do it like no motor stream is complete without both of those. Okay, that's enough. That's enough. That's enough flute. That's enough flute for the next 20 seconds. So yeah. So we have these 2 leads, each of them on a different octave. So we have 2 octaves, and then the chain for the lead is a disperser, a chorus from kilohertz, an instance of Saturn for high-end saturation, smart me, for the delay, for that delay that you're just hearing, double toot, and another honk, which I won't do. Because there's the density of automaton is too much. Let me do my breakdown in peace, okay? So the delay that you're hearing, that is this, and then there's a reverb for added reverb. So I basically just did the same melody that I did with the piano at the beginning. Just maybe a little bit more fleshed out. With some of those sexy glide, meow. With slightly faster notes. And then we have an EQ, or high pass, balance, some soothe to cut back on some highs, because these can get pretty ear rapey. See, that can get pretty... That can get pretty bad up there. So yeah, let's... And that's the final product. Let's have a look at the ARP. There's just a few layers. 4 layers actually. Wow, there's a lot of stuff in there. So first up we have that. This is Serum on just a basic detune saw. With a pitch automation that's like really fast, so it adds the like pew effect. So instead of doing it on a square, which is what I usually do, this time I did it on the saw. And then you are noticing that I have a sand with a crystallizer and a trans gate. Because, yeah. So, let's move on to the samplers, because there are 3 sampler layers here. This is the replacement for the square ARP. When you just have a sample that's just a square, why use a synthesizer? You cut back on CPU. And this is another one. Yeah, this is very much another like saw-like, almost 80s synthwave sounding bit. I just had a bit of an short volume, like ADSR to it. Okay. And this is another one. So all these different sounds, they are slightly different to each other. They make for the full combined sound. You get this really thick, you get both the harmonics from the saws and from the squares, and all the detuning from them, the way they combine, and with the crystallizer and the delay sense, they just make for this fat ARP sound. It's very prominent. And the super saws, same thing. It's just super saws with flanger. Razor again, repitched samples. These are all linked to the group volume LFO that I talked about. So Brahms. These are more synthesized Brahms than anything, to be honest. These are all from sample packs, I believe. This is from trailer SFX packs, which just had like a ton of like Brahms for like cinematic stuff. Same ARP from the intro. The Scarlet Growl from, I believe this is Hypernova. So yeah, it just adds a bit of a growly texture to everything. And a pad from Bejeweled. Add to that the sub, and you got the whole wall of sound. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 layers for that wall of sound. So the way that I approach this verse is just half time 3/4. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, with the snare being on 3 and the kick on 1. Bam, bam. And then for the breaks, I did a slightly different rhythm, where you get a lot more of that 6/4 feel. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, right? And again with this other break. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. This behaves much like a 3/8. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? Then we move on to the first build-up. Just getting you ready, getting you pumped up. Same note. Dun, dun. We just have cinematic Brahms. The world is about to come to an end, and all you have to do is dance to the stars to save the world. Coming yesterday on theaters. Bit of a stop down, that piano chill bit, and then it goes back to building tension. Then see here how the growl from the first drop is coming up, already alluding to that. So as you can see, a lot of this is rebounced samples. So these are melodic layers that I did with Morph. So I just took layers and I morphed them. And these are actually in Hypernova, I believe. So like this is the track where those samples from Hypernova were originally made. So that's one, and that's the other one. So then you get both layers. So this is just me messing with a phaser and like a growl being vocoded with some saws on Morph. Then we get this other growl. Meow. I believe I made this live in Vital. So maybe have a look at that stream then, where we made that. Or maybe I'm just stripping, who knows. Same Bram from the intro, same Atmos from the intro, same Scarlet Growl from the intro, and the same Pat from a Jewel from the intro. So a lot of this is just using the same samples in different ways to achieve different things. And now this is different. So this is when we get to the dun, 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 dun. So first we have the bass itself, which is just a super saw chord bass from the Xylant. I think it's the Power Pack 1, yeah. So this is 1. And it just has the volume LFO here. I believe I'm actually doing this, yeah. I'm doing that manually for some reason. Maybe just so I can have control of the shape, of the actual shape of the LFO, let's call it that way. This is really not, it's just a volume automation repeated to look like to sound like an LFO. And this is the squeak itself. This is also from Power Pack from Xylant. I just have a Haas effect on it for some additional stereo space, because the sample itself, it's originally just mono. That's how it originally sounds. So when you, obviously, when you cut bass and then you add that stereo space. So this is without, and then you add it, get that stereo space. I believe this sample was sent to me from a stream challenge, and I ended up just using it here because now it lies on my huge modus samples folder. So I just chopped random parts of it, random bits of it. Now it's there. And I think I also made this in like live in Vital. And I believe I have the presets saved for it, but I don't have them open here, so we're gonna gloss over that for now. So this is just a sample that I did in, so this is a sound that I did in Vital. And there's some like very ear rapey, like high mid there, so it can get pretty ear rapey there. So I'm cutting back on that, plus with a high pass. Then we have a transcate, right? And then a soothe. Yeah, again, for that really metallic resonance on the highs, get that out of there. And then a slight dynamic EQ there, maybe to solve an issue that I had with that sound. And then we have the recurring sub, also with that same volume automation. So everything here has that same automation. And because these basses move, like there's this movement to these wells. I can just do the LFO, and each time they show up, they'll do something different. Then we go about the drums 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now, as I said about the flexibility with 6/4, I can put the accents anywhere I want. So in the intro, the verse was on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the snare was on 5. Now the snare is on 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right? So now I've switched where the accent is. Dun, dun. Chord break and back into the same thing. So this is the exact same thing, but just the sample is reversed. So now instead of doing this, it's doing the exact opposite. It's going backwards. And now this is just doing a different thing. But these are doing the same. The squeak though is an octave lower. And we have that lead fading in slowly. So it comes in slowly and then it gets faster and faster. See that? So I believe this is just using the pentatonic scale. Or at least a variation of the pentatonic with the minor third. So it's using the same chord break. Dun, dun. But it just has a lead on top. Again, an accent change. Dun, 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 dun. So now instead of being dun, 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 now it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So now this is a triplet that spans 2 beats. So this is 1, 2, 3, and it happens over 2 beats. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, right? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. And then this is just one growl, like one hit per beat. 1, 2, 3, right? Set up for the second part of the drop. And Kara vocals, because of course everybody uses Kara vocals, so I am no exception. I did chop them around though. And they have a chain, which is just an EQ. Cut back on highs and add some high-end chorus for that like slightly added stereo effect. A disperser, an OTT, a saturator with twin tube, and a filter. So raw, unprocessed, this is how they sound. Which that's already very good. But that sounds slightly more in context. That sounds slightly more modus, slightly more like it. So this is just dun 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 dun. And I'm just using that bass line. Razor with some Harmer bass, I believe. Have a look. So the Razor we've already seen, and let's have a look. This is the same bass from Engine Start. So it is the same bass, just used in a different context again. So it's just about refashioning all these sounds. And you can use the same sound, the same sound in 5 different songs and nobody will notice. And you've just saved a ton of production time. You're being efficient at your job. These are all samples from a bass jam that I did all the way back in June 21. Which is right around the time when I was making this. Some glitches as well. Safe to say these are like the main building blocks of this second half. Right. And then we do have some more chops. Then we have some add-ons, some sweeteners. We have the uplifter here. So then we have the same break from the end of the verse. So we have that dun 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 dun. So now it's just a different melody. So let's have a look. Now it's just that the melody built up. So instead of going down dun 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 dun, now it goes up. So now it's dun dun dun. And then, meanwhile, the piano does go down, dun 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 dun, for that major third. So it ends up in that nice, at home D major. And we do have that bass tail from the dispersed sauce there. So we have that, and that adds that. It's going to give us an effect, almost like doing a filter cutoff without really doing it. So this is all about the piano, so we might as well cover this now. So we have a voice high up, and then we have another one further down. So we have dun 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 dun. This is the pentatonic. And then that dun major D. So we have a call and response between the lower voice of the melody and the bass. Dun 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 dun, right? So the bass and the lower melody, they're just talking to each other, almost like dancers dancing to the stars, right? And we have here a reference. Dun-dun-dun. Where does that come from? Well, it's this place. So if you listen to the Astral Realm, this is how this place starts. Right, and I just thought it fitting to add a little bit of a callback here. Dun, 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 dun. What was that? Dun, 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 dun. And that was at the end of the second drop. So this is going to set up, but it's going to be incomplete. So this is part of the second half of the second drop. That's where this motif reappears in full. But here in the breakdown, it shows up a little bit incomplete. It's missing that last F sharp, right? But it's not really there. Instead, we get this chord fade in. Sets it up for the next part of the breakdown, which is just a chiller. Same motif here. And we do have, I believe, a detuned square for a growl. Wow, 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 wow. It's the cat growl, it's the meow growl. You have any tips how to mix wide, thick, and harsh sounds like those synth scores and bass samples? Well, you just have to make sure everything sits in its right place, and you have to cut out any frequencies that don't help. If you have a bass, it might sound very thick, yeah, but how does it sound in context? Do you really need this frequency or that frequency in the context of the sound? Yeah, don't work with things individually. Work with all the layers, like in context, because that is what matters. When you listen to a song on SoundCloud, you can't solo the growl to see how that sounds. You just listen to everything, right? And I couldn't care less about how this growl sounds here, having soloed it. Probably sounds a bit quirky now, but you put it in context, hey, it actually sounds kind of good, right? So just make sure that you high pass, you low pass where need, you boost frequencies, you cut frequencies where you need, and just make sure you have it all under control and train your ear. Honestly, that's all I can say. So whenever you think you have any issues with your ear and you don't know like if this is too much or that's too little, first of all, get flat sounding headphones. And the second, just go with a peak bell and sweep the frequency spectrum and see if you can find things that sound bad to you. Well, here, this is already mixed, so, but for example here, you might not like that, so you cut it out a tiny bit, right? And you just sweep the frequency spectrum for things, and the things that you find that you don't like, so you arrange before mixing or at the same time. Nowadays I try to do the production first and then I touch up the mixing. But like mixing as you go, if it works for you, it's also a totally valid option. If it sounds good, it's good. So yeah, you just have to make sure that, for example, the frequencies in the piano don't get in the way of the frequencies of the square bass or the music box. Make sure that it complements well with the piano. All right, so when we get to this breakdown, again, that same E flat major chord, that's a second. So same chord here. And that's how I get to bridge into the second build-up. So this, I have been asked, like, how did I make this? Did I commission a vocalist to do this for me? No, this is Contact. This is a soloist vocal from a library called Audio Imperia Jaeger. And it goes all the way to F sharp. Yes, I have a tour reverb on it, because of course I do. But it has legato. It has that natural glide to it. The small syrup Virog, I believe that's how you say it. Welcome to Modus Live! So yeah, that's just, I did the same notes from the end of the phrase in the verse. So, dun, 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 dun. I just did that in vocal form. And then I did add a piano on top. It's very expressive. I did bounce this, so these two notes would not have reverb, and I only get the reverb from these three long notes. You have a tom fill there. Bum, 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 bum. This is resampled from the Superhuman Fail in AU5's Elemental Pack, I believe. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. See, now the accent is on 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. So now you can't really think of it as a 3/4 because it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and the snare falls in the middle of 2, so you have to think about it as 6, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How do you make the drums so punchy? Well, for one, you group all the instruments in a bus and you compress that bus with an OTT, and then you mix the drums separately to the instruments bus. And by the way, Lord Roach 7, I believe that it was, is now human. Thank you so much. Welcome to Modus Live. Consider joining the Discord server by typing !_ Discord in chat, which I'll do right now. For those of you who are joining just now, Nightbot, well, there it is. It does have a cooldown because it just sent the stream Vals Galactica link thing. So when you've OTT'd all of the instruments, so this is what I'm doing. I'm routing all of the instruments and the hats and the crashes to a common bus that I call sidechain. So this is not only where I do the sidechain. So this is a trigger that whenever it hits, it sidechains everything. See that? So if I turn this off, now it doesn't have sidechain. But then I also get to do funny things with that group, because now I have all instruments in one mixer track. That means I can, for example, OTT them. And by OTTing the instruments but not the drums, you glue all of the instruments except for the drums, meaning that the drums can just go right through everything else. So when you mix the kick and the snare separately, so these go onto a bus that's called drums, and that has a soft limiter in there, and what that does is it just limits the peaks without actually making them distort, or at least to a lesser extent. Shout out to my friend who can't seem to get here at the moment. Don't worry, he'll be here any second. So by doing this, you can just make these two instruments just punch through everything else, because all of the other instruments are getting compressed except for the drums, and the drums just punch through the compressed bit, through the compressed bus. We once again get that violin going in there. Again, that same da na 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 na. You get that sub drop from Hypernova, I believe. Yeah, this is from Hypernova. This is a shorter version of the first build-up, so this is... And see how here... Bam, 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 bam. See how this has the same rhythm as the start of the first drop. Dun, 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 dun. And this is the same. But now, the second build-up... Dun, dun, dun. Now it has the rhythm of the second half of this phrase. It has the slower pace to it that adds some variation to it. So that means this build-up is very similar, but not entirely the same. Has that dun dun dun, that slightly different timing on the growls, kick roll, and that's when we can finally come in. Dun, 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 dun. This one theme that we have been alluding to since the very start of the song, we have been setting it up very subtly, but it's there, right? And here in the music box again, we have been setting that up since the beginning, and now it's finally time for the payoff 3 minutes later. And again with the fundamental, that D major. Same motif with a different chord. So we get the recurring melody. And then And whenever you run out of ways to change the sub, you change the notes before it. And then here. That's what helps that all that variation to it. The Roach T7 or is that 17? That's 17. Hi. Again, second drop. And as for the wall of sound, this is pretty much the exact same wall of sound as in the verse. So see about this verse. It's pretty much the same, just with different chords. And the accent is now on 4 again. So while here the accent was in 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now it's in 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. So that's what we were talking about with the flexibility of having 6/4 instead of 3/4. But it's still very much the same wall of sound, just all the same layers, just with that added lead. Did you write the melody in this drop before the intro? The first thing I wrote, the very first thing I wrote in the song was the verse. This is the very first thing that I wrote. And then I believe the intro followed, and then the first drop, and then it all kind of went from there. All right, Generic, have a good one. So yeah. Very similar to the verse, but it just has a more drop feeling to it, right? We are coming home. Or maybe we are saying goodbye. One last dance, right? And we have that same E flat major chord. Yeah, but CPU please, CPU moment. F12 for good measure. Let's hit smart disable in here. Just it still kind of glitches out, but that's to be expected when you're live. So we have that same thing from the breakdown, and then same thing here. So it's just that one chord, that E flat major that we've always been doing. Not that one. It's there. It's in the drop. So yeah, it's in all sorts of places. And now here too. It's just used as a cadence for the next half of the drop. So this is just a bunch of growls just ascending up. So just going up all the time. So you have that final chord that is bounced. So I was able to cut it here. And forget about tails. So see how there's an initial burst and then it goes back up. And the same thing is true for all these keypads. So see how... We have a sub from Dennis K. Blun. I believe that is how you say it. Thank you so much for the tier for the tier 1 sub. My voice kind of got glitched out there. The protocol. Protocol has entered the chat. Oh god. That is gonna be really bad for the YouTube cut. I can already see it, like 1,000 memes of that on my Discord server. Alright. It's Kablan. Alright. Violin. I don't know why this pattern is called B-section ARPs when it's a razor. Must have misnamed that. There are some squid growls from Supernova. And another sub from WTF Senna. Thank you so much for the tier 1. Now I said it right. Thank you so much, dude. You are now a subscriber, which means you can now watch any and all previous VODs, live streams from this very Twitch page, and you get access to an exclusive text channel in my Discord server called Subscriber Club, where, by the way, if you were a subscriber earlier this week, you got early access to this very song on Thursday. So maybe that will happen in the future now you're subscribed. This quick growl is being distorted with two distortions, a destructor and a saturator. I don't know why, but that's just the way I did it. So, and this is, we're talking back in August, August 21. So the same chord cadence, dun dun dun. Sounds very Spanish now to think about it. Spain gang. Oh hey, the same growl from the beginning of the first drop. We had that. Now it shows up, but it's longer. Have a look at that. Now it's more sustained. Atmos and some vocal chops. So now that all of this is being filtered out, I need some rhythm to fill that gap. Dun, dun. While everything else is building up, you have these vocals filling out that empty space that the filter growls leave. A general high pass here, so we have that. So let's see where that's from. This is from, in the sidechain bus, there is a filter here. See that? That's where the sidechain comes from. And this is a slightly different version of the cadence from the end of the first drop. Dun, 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 dun. Now it's just with the different accents, with the change in the accents, with the snare roll. And then with a different piano. Now instead of the piano going down, now it goes up with the lead. And that's how it ends. And it just ends. So the song ends very suddenly, right? Damn. So it's just a chord there. So without this, so let's assume this wasn't there. That's how the song ends? Nah, there has to be something else to it, because I just thought, well, that's a very sudden ending. So I thought the easiest way would just be to add some ambient sounds. And have the ending not be like that sudden. So so at least we end and we cut into something else, not into total silence. So we just cut into some ambience. I believe this is from a pack called Boom Nature? Nature Essentials from Boom Library, right? So this just has some bird sounds in the background. And some forest sounds as well. And then there's a thunder here. And then I have some bird chirps tuned to the motif from the beginning. So it all like wraps back around. And if you go all the way back to the beginning, that's exactly how the song starts. So, an endless cycle, maybe it connects into the lore of MYP, who knows? I mean, everything, it's all connected. I guess that's what's fun about modus. It's just, yeah, about this modus thing. You get to make songs that they all intertwine, same storyline. Maybe the end isn't the end. Maybe it's just the beginning of something else. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe this is not the end. It's just the beginning. And who knows? And yeah, the ambient just fades out. And that was Vals Galactica. Now, I'm going to move on to the mixing and mastering project because I believe I've got at least 5 to 10 minutes to show you guys through. It's just a very simple. So what I usually do for mixing and mastering is just I export buses, groups of things. So I export first all the instruments without the sub. So that's one stem. Then I export only the sub bass. So I can mix the low end against the rest of the instruments, and then I export the kick separately, the snare separately, right? The hats also separately. So this is all of this. And then finally the crashes. So I can mix the volume of the crashes against the instrumental again. Because these are usually pretty ear rapey, and you really have to get those frequencies under control with the rest of the instrumental. What does this FL project file sound mastered? Because it kind of is. I have a temporary limiter here, and what this does is just help me not make stuff too loud. Because if I mix directly at 0 dB, that's going to spell all sorts of disaster because now there's no headroom. So this is just for me to prevent messing this project up. So when I turn it off, so this is how I export things. I first turn off the limiter and I start soloing things. I start with instruments and see how now it stays steadily at 6 dB or very near. And so I just turn off this limiter and I already have a nice and clean pre-master. I export that, I export the sub, I export the kick and the snare separately, I export the hats and then the crashes. And those are usually all the stems that I have. Maybe if there's something very specific that I want to change, maybe I'll export that as a stem of its own. But yeah, now let's load into the mixing and mastering project. But for that, I first have to close out of this. There it is. All right, now let's open and projects, mastering, Vals Galactica. Well, limit everything at 0 dB. Yeah, but first you have to have the pre-master and then you bring it up. Then you drive up the volume through the limiter. So if you noticed in that limiter, the input gain is driven up like +8. Because that's what brings up the loudness. You need the algorithm of the limiter to actually do things. If you do the limiter only to limit sounds, you're not gonna get any like flavor out of the limiter, right? The flavor you get from the limiter is by actually driving up the gain from a file that doesn't go anywhere near 0, or when it does, I cut it down with volume boosts. So I exported the pre-master. I believe this is one of the last few songs that I didn't do stems for. So I just have a single pre-master already here. And just one of the reasons why I do mastering on a separate FLP is because just look at that usage. The chain that I'm using for mastering is like, it's like, I have the oversampling like way up. It's all in like super high quality mode for mastering, right? So you need to get that very high quality sound. 50% of the CPU is already just gone from the master chain. So imagine if you were to do any kind of production here, that would be kind of chaotic. So first we have an analog EQ. So let's see if we can open that up. So very broad strokes. Maybe we can cut something out, but this is just mainly for the air boost. So let's have a look first at what that sounds raw. So that's what sounds raw. So now we are gonna add this. You know, it adds a tiny bit of air and cuts back on some of these critical areas, like 7K for the like really ear rapey hiss on the crashes, 1K-ish for the more nasal sounding stuff. We cut that back so it all sounds nice and balanced. See how it all gets balanced out a tiny bit. Now we use a bit of soothe on the mid highs, aka maybe top end, yeah, tiny bit. This is just to get rid of some garbage, clean up rubbish here. It's very quiet, but you can definitely hear it. Thank you for the follow. I can't really see the name because it's my viewport is too far away, but just know that I noticed you, senpai. Thank you for the follow. All right, Pro MB next. This is just I believe to compress the low end and some things on the crash area. So let's have a look. So this is let's solo this. Okay. So yeah, and then we have to compress the low end. So whenever the kick shows up, it's going to compress down so that low end is as compressed, as sausagey as possible, so we don't have any issues mixing it. So for example, when the kick goes too far over the sub bass, it might cause some distortion issues whenever the kick hits. So we just want the low end to be as controlled as possible. Using limiter to increase volume. Yeah, that is what you should be doing, because that is how you should use the limiter. You should use a limiter to increase volume, and then that's what adds the flavor to the limiter. Because if not, you're just setting yourself up for it's all going to come back down, and it's gonna cause all this distortion, and there's like no flavor to that. It all just sounds cold and digital and metallic and distorted, plasticky, right? So now we have another glue. I believe this is on Catch the Peaks. So this is just for any very eventual like peaks that you might see here, that out the window with the glue. Now we have an imager that is gonna basically just make the low end mono, and the rest maybe some control on the stereo width to get them a little bit less out of phase, but yeah. So let's take out the solo on the front. So yeah, this is just to make the low end nice and narrow. Make sure it doesn't go too far beyond, right? Same thing for the mid end. See how it's dangerously close to hitting out of phase, so that's why I dialed it back a little bit. Then we get onto the dynamics for, again, more compression, but very subtle one. See how it's barely compressing minus 2 dB at the absolute most. Most of the time, this is just going to compress very small amounts, minus 0.5, minus 1 maybe at most on the mid-end band maybe. This is all just to get everything slightly more under control, so that when you drive it up through the compressor and the limiter, those differences in volume will be brought back up, and they will be exaggerated a lot more. So then there's a little bit of OTT once again too. So you're seeing in there 7% depth, and the upwards knob is just turned all the way down. So this is very, very, very tiny. Just for a little bit of glue, and see how the interface is already shitting itself. But don't worry, this is all just because the chain is very heavy. So now we have the limiter, which is doing the actual work of adding the flavor and the loudness to it. So see how the gain is brought way up, and here what I'm doing here is just a volume automation to control the input volume, to control what goes into the limiter, to make sure the drops are the loudest part. So see how here in the drops, that's the loudest parts, and then in the off drops I dial it back a little bit to make sure the drops are the absolute highest intensity part. And then the Pro L, this is just an additional step that I want to that I like doing. So this isn't really doing any flavor work. This is just making sure I don't distort in the analog domain. So I'm just setting it up to true peak and just minus 0.1. That is all it's doing. So see how here it's barely cutting anything. maybe some peaks. Maybe some peaks that go there, but see how the red line is doing almost absolutely nothing, right? And then just to see what is actually happening, I just have a loudness meter to do just to check. And as you can see, it's pretty reasonable. But see how the true peak is not exceeding 0. In fact, it is not even exceeding minus 0.1. And that is basically how you get the modus sound. That is how you get the modus mastering in it.